Copenhagen. In a wide-ranging press interaction at the European Summit in Copenhagen, the visiting leader stressed that the continent's security, economic resilience and diplomatic posture depend on deepening cooperation, both inside Europe and with partners across the globe. His remarks came amid heightened tensions over Russian military moves, drone incursions in northern Europe, and ongoing debates about supporting Ukraine's defence. The official began by outlining his broader vision for Europe's role in a changing world order. We do cooperate, and we want to increase the cooperation with countries and continents everywhere in this world to progress together on a peace agenda and an open trade agenda, open and fair trade agenda, he said. Framing this as more than just a statement of principle, he explained that the push for outreach is strategic. This is why we want to multiply this intimacy with ASEAN, CPTPP, the African countries, LATAM countries. And I think this is a very important strategy which has nothing to be subtracted to our existing alliance in NATO, but is a very important complement for the European Union and for the Europeans. He underlined that this vision does not weaken the continent's traditional security framework, but rather complements it by expanding Europe's diplomatic and economic reach. And by the way, working as Europeans with the cooperation of all the Europeans, not just those being part and members of the EU, is extremely important. This is why our European political community is so important, because this is a way to cooperate from UK to Turkey. The statement reflected an awareness that European security is linked not just to military alliances like NATO, but also to economic connectivity and shared political platforms that include countries outside the EU. Moving from trade and diplomacy to security concerns, the leader warned that Europe's political cooperation must translate into joint action against real-world threats. He said that whether dealing with cross-border narcotics trafficking, terrorist networks, or potential confrontations with major powers such as Russia, the continent's unity would be tested. When you speak about this existential threat for the Europeans, when you speak about cooperation against narco-traffic, against terrorist groups, or against existential threat or the conflict with some powers like Russia, this is absolutely critical, he said. The message was clear. The emerging challenges are not isolated to one country or one region, but cut across borders, demanding a common response. The official acknowledged that recent incidents, including the use of drones near sensitive European facilities, highlight the fragility of the security environment. He linked these to the broader contest with Russia, while carefully avoiding unverified accusations. Look, I was mentioning that to your colleagues. I think it means that we are tested. In some countries, it's clearly established and linked to Russia. In some other countries, like yours, I remain very careful. But it means that we have to improve our equipment collectively and cooperate to have early warning systems, much more anti-drone systems, and much more capacities as well to deter our enemies, and a proper cooperation. And this is why the meeting this afternoon is so important. This remark set the tone for the afternoon's agenda at the summit, a focus on hardening Europe's defences, not just against conventional military threats, but also hybrid challenges such as drones, cyber attacks, and covert maritime activity. One reporter pressed the leader on reports that a suspected Russian shadow war vessel had been sighted in Danish waters and was now near the French coast. The question touched on a sensitive investigation. It is not me to establish this link, and I will remain very careful. But I think our Navy did its job, and it was a very important operation. Now it's under the control of our justice, and this is the best evidence of the fact that in the Baltic Sea, in the North Sea, in the Atlantic Ocean, in the Mediterranean Sea, you have a lot of vessels precisely being part of this shadow fleet. He went further, offering figures that underscored the scale of the problem. Our assessment is that something between 600 and 1,000 boats are part of these shadow fleets, and they do contribute to the financing of the Russian economy and the Russian war effort, probably at least for a third of this war effort. So if we want to be efficient, we have to sanction these boats, insurance companies, the ports. This is what we are doing. And by the way, we do it with the 19th package of sanctions. The leader stressed that sanctions alone were not enough. But we have as well to cooperate and organise ourselves in order collectively to be much more efficient and to be sure that all these boats are compliant with our international rules and national rules. It was not the case for this operation, and obviously everything we can establish and clarify after the drones attack for Denmark, we will do it. In a gesture of solidarity, he added, and I want here to reiterate all my solidarity. We provided some equipment for the protection of your air in the days to come in the context of this summit. You are a very strong and very well-equipped country. with a very impressive army. But we will cooperate on all these issues. Turning to Ukraine's struggle against Russian aggression, the leader endorsed ongoing discussions about expanding the range and sophistication of the weapons supplied to Kyiv. I think all the discussions which allow Ukrainians to resist much more efficiently and end this war are good discussions, he said. The statement was measured yet firm, reflecting a European commitment to help Ukraine defend itself, while hinting at debates within Western capitals over the supply of long-range systems. As the press conference continued, one journalist asked whether the current moment felt like the world was edging toward a crisis reminiscent of the years preceding World War II. The leader cautioned against overdramatic parallels. I think we all have to be very cautious because we are in a time of confrontation with a lot of hybridity. This is why we have to be strong to deter any aggressions, but we have to remain as well very cautious and avoid any escalation. This note of restraint underscored the balancing act European leaders face, projecting strength to deter hostile actions without provoking further escalation. The remarks collectively painted a picture of Europe standing at a crossroads. On one hand, the continent is expanding its diplomatic and economic ties beyond its immediate region, reaching out to Africa, Latin America, and Asia-Pacific nations to forge a broader peace and open trade agenda. On the other, it is grappling with very immediate security challenges posed by Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, covert maritime operations, hybrid threats such as drones, and the spectre of escalating confrontation. Throughout the conversation, the leader insisted that Europe's response must be collective and coordinated. Security, trade, and diplomacy were framed as parts of a single strategy, resilience through unity. The reference to the European political community, an initiative that brings together both EU members and non-EU neighbours like the UK and Turkey, suggested that the continent's leaders are seeking formats that transcend old institutional boundaries. The idea is to knit together a broad coalition that can address everything from borderless crime to conventional military threats. While his words were at times emphatic, especially in condemning the shadow fleet that he said helps finance Russia's war, the overall tone was one of measured determination rather than alarmism. He repeatedly urged caution, underscoring that Europe must avoid unnecessary escalations, even as it fortifies its defences. His acknowledgement that we are tested hinted at the psychological and political pressure facing European governments as they manage both the war on their doorstep and the hybrid tactics that often operate below the threshold of open conflict. The mention of providing air defence equipment to Denmark during the summit also conveyed a tangible demonstration of solidarity, reinforcing that European cooperation is not merely rhetorical but involves concrete military support where needed. By the close of the exchange, the message that emerged was consistent. Cooperation within Europe, across alliances like NATO, and with partners in other continents is the only viable path forward. The leaders' decision to highlight the link between open trade and security signalled a recognition that Europe's strength lies not just in its armed forces, but in its economic partnerships and political unity. The call to sanction and monitor the shadow fleet illustrated how economic measures and security imperatives intersect in modern geopolitics. The Copenhagen summit thus became more than a diplomatic gathering. It served as a reminder that Europe's challenges today, from hybrid threats and covert maritime networks to ongoing war and geopolitical competition, are interconnected. Addressing them requires not only solidarity among European nations, but also strategic partnerships across the globe. As the leader put it, Europe's mission is to progress together on a peace agenda and an open trade agenda, complement for the European Union and for the Europeans. That vision, coupled with the warning to remain strong yet cautious, framed the summit as a moment of strategic reflection for the continent, one that balances resilience with restraint in an era of growing confrontation